Hi, Dan. How you doing?
Hey, Alan, how are you?
Good. Hey, it's great to have you on. I know you have a movie to promote, but also I want to talk to you about Slam Dance
Yeah,
when it's over. But let me get you in the proper position here. Dan, you're here to talk about 18 and a half. The movie came out a while ago, but it's on DVD now, or is it? Yes, it's on
yes,
DVD now.
DVD.
You sent me you sent me the making of DVD, which is one of the things I want to talk about.
Yeah,
And the making of DVD is actually longer than the movie itself, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
Yeah. The making of documentary, which is on the DVD. But yes, it is like all good making of docs. It is a half hour longer than the film itself.
Yeah. So tell us about 18 and a half, and then I want to talk about the making of, because there's some
Sure.
interesting.
So yes, 18 and a half is a Watergate comedy thriller about a young woman in the Nixon White House who gets a hold of the missing 18 and a half minute gap in the Watergate tapes, and she tries to leak it to a reporter, and then naturally they run afoul of hippie swingers and nefarious people out to get them. So it's a fun movie. It stars Willa Fitzgerald and John Magaro, Richard Kind, Vondi Curtis Hall, Kathy Curtin. It's got naturally Bruce Campbell as the voice of Nixon, and
Ted Raimi in there,
and Ted Raimi as one of the other voices, and John Cryer as the voice of Haldeman. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun, and a cameo by Lloyd Kaufman from Troma, because why not? Literally, he insisted. So it's a fun movie, and we shot it. We started shooting March 3rd, 2020. What could possibly go wrong in March of 2020? And of course, there was a global pandemic that hit on our 11th day. So we had to shut down for 6 months. So we took this 6-month healthy hiatus, and then came back and shot the rest of it once all the protocols came into place. So our making of kind of goes into a lot of what was going on, like as the pandemic was hitting, a little indie film trying to make a movie. But anyway, as you know, the film then played at about 25 festivals, including one that you were on the jury of. And yeah, thanks for that big award there, Alan.
Oh, appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it's this is a testament. I mean, you've been fairly prolific when it comes to indie films, and
thank you.
And is this one of the biggest ones you've done in terms of success? Or
I think in terms of success, yeah, I think it's my most successful creatively, but also commercially, because then we went on to do a 60-city theatrical release starting in 2022, I think, around then, and then it played on Star. It's been playing on Stars regularly. And then we also sold it to 11 airlines around the world. On like every continent around the world, there's someone who's flying around watching the movie. And then this DVD deal. And as of today, the DVD has sold to 300 public libraries all across America in almost every state, which is a weird market I didn't even know existed until about 2 weeks ago. So, but it's cool.
Yeah, let me talk about the DVD, because and the 2-hour making of, because I think for me personally, it was like this making of is rich in resources for an indie filmmaker.
Yeah,
you guys definitely went through a lot. One of the things I want to ask you that's brought up in the DVD, but it's it was your Kickstarter, your crowdfunding. Tactics, because you did something that I didn't think. I kind of think of these crowdfunders as you're funding the entire movie, but you kind of approached it from using it to get over that first hurdle. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I always say it's Kickstarter, not kick finisher. You should really only try to, if you can raise 10 or 15% of your budget that way, that's great. And then I kind of use it, and this particular campaign we did on Seed and Spark, but I've used Kickstarter on other campaigns. It's about the same. But really, it's kind of a Trojan horse to try to raise bigger amounts of money. I always say, like, your old bass player buddy from college, Dave, gives you $40, but then he puts the goofy picture of Nixon and him photoshopped as Elvis on his Facebook page, and then his brother-in-law, the Silicon Valley investor, says, that's cool, I'll give you $10,000, as an equity investor or something like that. And, and then you get like 300 people, on your team, and then they've got suggestions and ideas for more money. So it's really, I think when you're doing a feature, with a short, you can maybe raise your whole budget through crowdfunding. But for a feature, if you can just raise that small percentage, that nugget, it's really the people getting involved that are the real resource and advantage to it. And that's kind of how you get that momentum. I always say the hardest person to convince that you're making a movie is yourself. And once you've gone through a crowdfunding campaign, then you're now sort of morally obligated to all these people to actually finish making the movie or start making the movie. And so it's more of a psychological thing than a financial thing. But and then have fun with it too. That's the other thing too, which is some people, approach these things as, oh my God, what a drag, I've got to ask for money. But if you're having fun, and we were doing, we were putting people's names in Nixon audio tapes, and they were posting those on Instagram, and we were having fun with the whole process, and which in a weird way did kind of influence kind of how we made the movie and the tone and the scope of the film itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you brought up the pandemic. I believe in the documentary it said you were 4 days away from finishing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you had to shut down.
Exactly. And we had just found out that we were pretty much the last film shooting in North America, and we were like, oh my God, what does everyone else know that we don't know? Because we were pretty isolated. We were shooting on the tip of Long Island at my friend Terry's motel, and it was 3 hours from New York City, so we weren't really sure what was going on in the rest of the world. And then and then we realized, oh yeah, we got to shut down.
I know that's weird, because you guys were you were in a bubble and you didn't even know it.
Yeah, we didn't even know. We didn't know. Yeah, that term hadn't quite, been invented yet for what we were doing. But yeah, I mean, we were pretty safe. It was pretty much of a bubble, but it was, but that we knew we couldn't have gone that extra 4 days because we had a lot more cast coming in for those last 4 days for the schedule, and it was just getting too complicated to bring people out. But then what happened was, like, a third of our crew, Terry said, hey, if you guys want to stay at this motel, no one else is coming, so why don't you guys just stay here? And these were all like the single Brooklyn hipster types. And if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, New York City was kind of the epicenter in the US anyway. And so they were like, yeah, we don't want to go back to New York. So a third of them stayed there for like over 2 months. And my DP, Elle Schneider, she stayed for 6 months. I think she's still there. I haven't seen her since. Some of us with families, we had to come home, but they all stayed and kind of created their own little weird artist in residency program, because they still had the camera, because we never got a chance to return the camera either. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. You had all the equipment and couldn't return it. So,
so they were shooting shorts, they were shooting music videos, they were having a blast, and eating all of our leftover product placement Omaha steaks too. That's how they survived. Otherwise, they would have eaten the key grip.
And then also, what was it? I mean, how much sweating were you doing? How long was it until you could finish shooting?
It was 6 months. It was 6 months that we took a break, and then we were one of the first films that was kind of back in production using the SAG and DGA protocols, masks and shields and all that. But I think what really helped was that about 2 months into the pandemic, so really the heart of it in like May or June of that year, we realized that one of the things we were going to do in post-production we could do then, which was record the 18.5-minute gap because it was all audio anyway, so it was about an 18.5-minute little mini radio play kind of within the thing. And Bruce Campbell, he was in Oregon, John Cryer was in LA, Ted was kind of stuck in Canada with some new girlfriend, but he was stuck there, and a couple of them had decent microphones. We're like, you know what, there's this new thing called Zoom, why don't we just do it over Zoom? And they were all like, yeah, because actors were sitting around with nothing to do. They couldn't, they weren't acting. And it was great. So we did it over 2 days. We recorded them over Zoom. To this day, I've never met Bruce in person. I've met him on Zoom. but it was really exciting because, like, at a time when the whole creative world had shut down, we were still making part of our movie. And I think that was a huge shot in the arm, literally, to everyone on the cast and crew. Like, oh, this crazy Mirvish guy's still making this movie. I guess we're still on. I guess we'll come back and we'll finish it. And you know, meanwhile, my composer Luis Guerra, you know, who lives just a few blocks away from me in LA, you know, he was starting to work with musicians, also kind of stuck around the world. In Mexico City, there was a group of musicians. In Brazil. And so we were doing a lot of music because musicians couldn't do anything then either. And so all of a sudden we were like writing all these new bossa nova tracks, you know, and having like a studio in Brazil record them. We're like, this is awesome, you know. We should have a pandemic all the time. But it was, but that was the key. Like, other than that and making sourdough, you know, and then I was editing the film too. You know, editing the footage that we had, which was about 80% of the movie at least. And then, you know, then we could kind of tweak the script for when we would come back and make it better. Like, oh, we need this, we don't need that. And so I think creatively, it if anything, it certainly didn't hurt. It maybe helped.
What's cool that you were editing and making sourdough at the same time.
Well, you got to. I mean, you've got those, you know, it's got to rise for 20, you know, 2 hours. All right, well, let's cut some scenes, you know.
Exactly. Well, Mike here, my co-host, he's actually starting his own production company. They're kind of in the early stages of that. Mike, do you have a question?
For your loss.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's sometimes what it feels like. You know, I always love hearing from independent like people, especially with the crowdfunding thing, because I think that's a I wouldn't say new, but I think it's a untapped market sometimes for film, because I think people get intimidated by it, or like you said, you know, or even the emotional aspect of it. Once you've got that money, you kind of have all these people looking at you and stuff like that. Like, for you going forward, like, what do you think for independence the best way to like go about getting films made or getting, you know, projects off the ground is? Like, what would you give advice to, like newer independents or people that are wanting to get into this? What would you say to like say, hey, this is the best way to get started or get kind of things off the ground or get your feet in the door?
Yeah, I think, you know, my mantra has always been, it's better to make the low budget movie than wait to try to make the bigger budget version, you know, because, and you know, and I've gone down that road with other projects in the past where you're waiting for the perfect financing, you're waiting for the perfect cast. I mean, even on 18 and a half, you know, we just forgetting about the pandemic, but we still, we were a week, like 4 days into shooting, and we didn't know who our second two leads were going to be. Because we hadn't cast them yet, because someone had dropped out and things were happening. But, you know, we set that start date, and that was key. I mean, that was something I learned from Robert Altman years ago. Set a start date, tell everyone the train's leaving the station, you're making this movie. And then again, if you believe it, other people will start to believe it too. And eventually we got an amazing cast and got Bondi Curtis Hall and Kathy Curtin, like with 36 hours notice. But if we hadn't really set a start date and said, hey, we're going to make this movie, we probably never would have made the movie to this day, because the pandemic was right around the corner. So I think that's key, is to make the movie with the resources you have, with the friends you have, with the money you have. Don't wait around for, you know, Hollywood to answer your door when you come knocking, because they keep changing their address. You know, they keep moving around. And
that's true.
So stop knocking and just make your own movie. That, you know, that's kind of been my thing. And you know, Alan, I think, knows I wrote a book called The Cheerful Subversive's Guide to Independent Filmmaking, which I strongly recommend everyone should buy. And then buy another copy for their friends, you know.
There you go.
But so that's but yeah, that's one of the big things in there, is set a start date and say you're making the movie. And yeah, and if you get a you know, fancy pants name actor, great. But if you don't, that's okay. You know, just make the movie.
Yeah,
very cool.
I mean, John McGarrett did pretty good after that with
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, and then right after our film, he did Past Lives, and you know, Mr. Oscar. Well, you know, you know, Oscar nominated.
film, best picture. All right. We had some questions from the audience. Davina Duckworth, thanks so much, Dan. It's great to hear about indie filmmaking. Absolutely. From Krizik, a lot of people got into bread making during the pandemic. I got into Instant Pot during the pandemic. From AD Ellis on Rumble, what was behind the writing of what was the missing tape, the missing 18.5 minutes, and how did the process of recording the audio over Zoom affect the outcome of the sound?
Right. So the process of writing it, because I mean, in real life, nobody knows what's on that tape. It is still missing to this day. Nobody knows who erased it, why it was erased, what was on it. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of theories about it. But, you know, but if you're doing historical fiction, it kind of frees you up to put whatever you want on there. You know, there is no wrong answer. And so what we did is we looked at a lot of looked and listened to a lot of other Nixon tapes that were not deleted, which, you know, there's tons of them.
Did you go to the library for that, by the way?
Yeah, we worked. I went to the Nixon library at one point, but I also went to, we talked to people at the Miller Center at the University of Virginia. They're one of the repositories of Nixon tapes, and they were really helpful. But a lot of the stuff is online too. Weirdly, very little of it has been transcribed for odd legal reasons. But you can hear the tapes, and that kind of gets into. So we were able to kind of tweak what we wanted the tape to say to fit the plot and the characters that we had, and that was while still being realistic and taking phrasing from real Nixon things. And then that kind of speaks to the audio quality is when we listen to the tapes, you know, and I had John and Ted and Bruce listen to the tapes as well. You know, they're not very good quality. And also the mic, everyone was mic'd differently. So it actually meant that doing it on Zoom was with everyone having different kind of mics was fine. You know, it was a little bit more complicated than just doing it like a regular Zoom call. We had each guy, each of the actors record. We could see and hear each other on Zoom live. Then they also recorded on like Voice Record Pro, which is like an app on your phone, or QuickTime or something like that. Slightly better versions of it, and then they would email those files to me after our sessions, and then I would sync them up to the Zoom track. But actually, the Zoom tracks themselves were almost as good as what we got off of the quote unquote higher quality stuff. And then our post production, we kind of futzed everything anyway and made it sound kind of futzy. But what was interesting was the day before we recorded, we were all listening to the part of the Nixon tape that's right after it got deleted, because it's part of a 2-hour tape, just to kind of get the rhythm and the tone and the feel of that room. And what we realized was about 2 minutes after the deletion, Nixon and Haldeman start talking about this movie that they had just seen that weekend called, what is it now? It was a Robert Redford film from 1972.
3 days ago.
It was a heist. It's like a goofy heist movie. Let me just see, Redford heist movie, 1972. Anyway, and they're talking about the Hot Rock. That's what it is, the Hot Rock, which is a crazy, weird, odd movie, and it's good. Anyway, and they're laughing about this movie because it's a heist gone wrong, and they're like, just like the Watergate thing. And this is like 3 days after the break-in. And we're just like, oh my God, we're the first people to actually hear this, because and we researched, nobody had ever mentioned that they're laughing about Watergate right after the 18.5-minute gap, because nobody ever listened to that part of the tape because they weren't really talking about Watergate. And so we made this interesting historical discovery just by listening to the tapes. And so if you go to the end, spoiler alert, in our end credits, we have Bruce and John and Ted do a version of Nixon talking about Redford and the Hot Rock. And, you know, and of course the irony was that, you know, Redford would be in All the President's Men 2 years later. And
Awesome.
yeah, okay. So it's some weird stuff like that, where what was real and what was fiction kind of got mixed around.
That was a weird time. As a kid, that's my first memory of a president, his resignation.
Exactly.
From A.D. Ellis, Lloyd Kaufman has a role in your film. What influence has he had on your work, on your filmmaking career, and Slamdance. We'll talk about Slamdance right after this. So,
sure. Well, Lloyd is, you know, we've known Lloyd for well over 20 years. I think starting with, because he distributed Cannibal the Musical, Trey Parker and Matt Stone's film, which was kind of the precursor to Slamdance. They showed that in Park City in 1994, and we had heard about those guys, and that was kind of what influenced Slamdance. And then a few years later, once they got big with South Park, then Troma picked up Cannibal the Musical, and we did a big retrospective screening of it in Park City with Trey and Matt and Lloyd, and kind of that was how we first got to know him. And yeah, and he would always show up in Park City doing Troma dance and things like that. And we would do events with him. So he was actually the reason he's in the movie is because he was emailing me that winter to say, "Hey Dan, I'm going to be in Park City. Are you guys doing Slamdance?" And da da da. And I said no. I that year I thought we were going to be shooting the movie then. So I said no. I think I'm shooting this movie in New York. Great, can I be in it? And I was like, you can't say no to Lloyd. It's rude. So that's why he's in the movie. You know.
All right. Well, then that's why I didn't see you at Slamdance that year.
Yeah.
That was my only time at Sundance.
Right. But the crazy thing is, though, is after we shot the movie, like a year later, we're at the Tallgrass Film Festival in Wichita, and Lloyd is there with Pat, his wife. And they're telling me this crazy story about how Lloyd was actually at the Nixon White House because he was invited to Nixon's daughter's wedding because he was like college friends with the groom. And and Lloyd hitchhiked there and his date was Carolyn McCarthy, who later became a congresswoman. And so I went into the National Archives and found a picture of, I think, Lloyd at the Nixon wedding, which is crazy. Like,
that's crazy.
And why he didn't tell me that when we were shooting the movie, I don't know, but he waited a year. Anyway, so yeah, so that's on the DVD. That's on the DVD. You'll see that.
In fact, Crispy asks, where can I find the documentary? I'll definitely watch it.
You can find it wherever fine DVDs are sold, or go to your local library, because it's at a lot of libraries too, as I just discovered.
I assume it's on Amazon.
But yeah, it's on Amazon. It's Target on their website. You can order it, and it's not that expensive. It's like $14 or something. So, and it's old school, vintage. It's not even Blu-ray. It's better than Blu-ray. It's just Ray.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the old school format.
Old school. So, yeah.
So one thing I did want to talk about, because you were one of the founders of Slamdance, the big news came out a week ago, actually, that Slamdance is moving out of Park City and coming to Los Angeles. And I don't know how involved you are with Slamdance these days, but tell us about the move, and are you giving us your thoughts about it, or do you have some kind of inside information?
Yeah, no. It's well, first of all, I'm not as involved with Slamdance anymore. But still a little bit. I was there this year, and I do an opening night poem every year, and I'm kind of a de facto mentor for a lot of the new filmmakers, and I hosted a few screenings, so I still do get involved, when they need me, but it's largely programmed by alumni, which is great because we now have 30 years of alumni, and not too shabby alumni, by the way, from Chris Nolan, Bong Joon-ho, Ryan Johnson, the Russo brothers, the late Lynn Shelton, Sean Baker, Safdie brothers, Gina Prince Bywood. It's pretty impressive list of folks. But for those who don't know Slamdance, just look up some of those names, and we'll see. But anyway, it's funny that everyone's like, oh my God, Slamdance is moving to LA. We've been talking about this for 29 years. It started in 1996.
I don't doubt that.
Year, we were like, maybe we should move to LA, because most of us live in LA. Our headquarters is in LA. So it's not that for us, and we've events in LA almost every year, like incrementally, over the years. We did a really nice thing at Agbo Studios, the Russo brothers studio in downtown LA just last summer. We were like a 3-day event there. And we were like, wow, people are coming to this. It's a really cool space. The Russos are great. They've been great supporters over the years. So, but the impetus to move was really you know, and every year we would kind of reevaluate. Are we in the right place? Are we at the right time? You know, should we keep doing this? And every year it was like, yes, we should stay in Park City. This year it was, no, it's too expensive. We had just gotten the, we were back at the Yarrow Hotel, which I know you know, which was our venue, which was our main venue for our first 2 years. And then Sundance kicked us out after 1996. And then we were up at the Treasure Mountain Inn. But that was getting too expensive. And then Sundance has really cut down in the last couple of years, sort of post-pandemic. And because people weren't coming and everything was getting more expensive. So they abandoned the Yarrow. They weren't going to use it last year. So we went in and we had a great time there, and it was a great venue and a great location. And then Sundance was like, ah, crap, you Slamdance guys figured it out. You know, you're back here again. And so they had booked it then for next year. So we really didn't have like an obvious venue to go back to for next year. And it really, the price of Park City, I mean, it is the most expensive city in America during the height of ski season. And people in Park City don't particularly like Sundance or Slamdance being there at that time of year, because we take all the hotel spots and condo spots that they want skiers to be in. So it's a weird, there's always been this weird dynamic there. And, you know, and look, Sundance, not for nothing, they've been, you know, there's all kinds of rumors about they're taking bids from other cities. They're thinking of their contract with Park City runs out after next year. So they may go to who knows where, Denver or you know, Santa Fe, nobody knows, or they may stay where they are. But we're just like, you know what, for us, let's just go to LA next year. We know how to do events here. We live here. It's cheaper. You know, I'm going to have half the filmmakers living in my garage next year, I'm sure. It's the one downside, but hey, more the merrier, you know?
Yeah, no, because Chris and I have been talking, I mean, every year it's, do we need to go to Sundance?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's at the weird time of the year. It's in January. And so the films are, you know, it's the beginning of the year. The films are not being talked about enough. And we soon found out is that after that first weekend, people left. Everyone left.
Yeah.
And
really weird.
Yeah. And it just seemed like, you guys moving to LA was just made a whole lot of sense. And, you know, and I think you can, you know, bring a lot more eyes to Slamdance itself. Definitely a lot more people into the theater.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Because as you know, I mean, in Park City, honestly, the theaters that we did have were always tiny and packed. And so it's not like that many people were actually seeing the films in Park City. And over the years, fewer sort of deals were being made. Fewer executives were in Park City. Like you said, like the last few years, people were leaving after that first weekend. So hang on a second, why are we still all hanging around here? And now the town's empty. Like that just, even Sundance this year shut down the Eccles after that Wednesday. And we were just like, wait, what? That's you know, wow. Park City built that location for Sundance, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of a slap in the face to them. So
that's, wow. So yeah,
it's crazy. And then meanwhile, I mean, LA, you know, there are still some good festivals in LA, but there's no, you know, LA Film Festival's gone, Outfest is gone. Like, it's not like LA has some great festival that we're, you know, upsetting. So, or big festival, you know, there's plenty of room for lots here.
Absolutely. Okay. Ron Phelps says, I hear Slamdance and I get warm and fuzzies. Let me ask you this, especially for Mike, but what would you say is the kind of film Slamdance is looking for people wanting to possibly submit their film to you?
It's funny because, and you may have a slightly different opinion of this as an objective observer, but we've never really had a quote unquote Slamdance film, you know, model in mind. I mean, we've shown dramas, comedies, narrative fiction, documentaries, international films, national films. Of all kind. We tend to mix them around as opposed to kind of ghettoizing like world versus US, which Sundance and a lot of other festivals do. So, you know, we'll have Bong Joon-ho showing his film next to some guy from Iowa. So that's a little bit different. But I think that the one key thing is some sort of originality. You know, that I think is the one mark of every Slamdance film, is that they're doing something original, maybe the tone, the content, the style, there's at least some element to it that people haven't seen before. But also because the focus, at least for the main competition, is first-time directors without distribution, is that they tend to be, not tend to be, sometimes they're a little rough around the edges, but you can definitely see, oh, this filmmaker has something interesting that we want to see what their next film is. And, and if you think about some of our more successful filmmakers, you don't remember the Russo brothers' first film Pieces. Hardly anyone has seen Nolan's Following, or Rian Johnson's Evil Demon Golf Ball from Hell. But we could see in all those films, oh, this is a filmmaker to watch. And I think, and there's something there. And because all of our programming is done by alumni filmmakers, like, we're looking at it through the lens of another filmmaker. And I think that has lent a slightly different, take on our programming choices compared to Sundance or other festivals.
Yeah, I like how you describe it, because I always thought Slamdance was the anti-Sundance. But I like the fact that whenever I see a Slamdance movie, there's something different about it. There's something odd about it. There's something that just, you realize why they're not getting, the big theatrical, because they're that different. And to give a filmmaker a chance is so important. And I think that's the main reason why Slamdance exists.
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, you said it best. That should go on the poster, Alan. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people still think it's the anti-Slamdance. If anything, it's the pre-Sundance. Because so many of our filmmakers, we show their first film, but then their second film will play at Sundance, or
from Nolan. I think it was Memento that ultimately got to.
Yep, exactly. Or like Napoleon Dynamite. We showed the short Palooka. That I literally introduced Jared to the producers that then gave him the money to make the feature Napoleon Dynamite, and the next year that played at Sundance. So, very cool. So that's another way of looking at it, which I don't know that Sundance has ever quite appreciated about us, but whatever.
I know you would think, why would they treat you like that? That's the thing.
If you don't mind, I got another question.
Go ahead.
I'm just really big on. I mean, obviously for myself, but I'm really big on like encouraging other people, because I feel like, a lot of people get really discouraged, or they get worried, or like you said, I really appreciated what you said about like, just go out and do, like, instead of worrying about making the perfect storm happen to make a movie. Would you say, like, in your opinion, that the independent scene is like growing at like a pretty rapid pace? Have you noticed like an uptick in people that are like trying to get into the independent scene? And even with that, like, is there something different about like this next generation of like filmmakers and people that are trying to get in the independent scene that is like encouraging to you or exciting to you?
It's interesting. I do a lot of guest lecturing at film schools, and I've started teaching at Chapman a little bit this year. And let's hear it, Alan, for those.
I know you're in my area.
I know.
There you go.
Go Dodge.
And the weird thing is, I think 10 years ago, if you'd asked a room full of film students, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a director. That's how everyone talked, right? Yeah. Their first day in film school. You ask them now, and like at least 50% say, I want to be a showrunner. And I think that is a big fundamental change, is that so many more people want to get into episodic, TV work, which is just culturally very different from film. It's more about the writer, and the writer becomes the producer, and as opposed to indie features where it's much more director driven or producer driven, but not so much writer driven. So in that regard, I think fewer people are seeking out fame and fortune in independent filmmaking.
Interesting.
But on the other hand, you've got 1 billion people making TikToks every day. And guess what? They're all filmmakers. They may not think about it, and Hollywood certainly doesn't think about them as filmmakers, but that's exactly what they are. And and a good indie feature is just, 210 TikToks strung together. That's the length of a movie. So people are learning the tools of filmmaking and the storytelling you know, much earlier, you know, when they're like 5 years old, they're making better TikToks than half the indie films coming out of Sundance. So, I think so that's different. But whether those people are even in that headspace to say, oh, okay, now I'm going to make an indie feature, I don't know that it's any more or less or about the same. I think in terms of numbers of submissions and things like that, it's kind of been a remarkably steady over the last few years. But I think it's because there's all these like countervailing influence. Some people are going to TV, some people are staying in TikToks, and then there's a bunch of people who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to get rich and famous making independent films that nobody sees, you know. But that's the point of independent film, is it's not about making money. It's not, and it shouldn't be. It's about making art, you know, maybe small a art, but you know, it's the one, you know, because if you're making like an episodic show, you're answering to executives at the studio and the network and the this and the that, and it's, you know, it's going to get really watered down. And there's not, and Hollywood isn't making features other than, you know, a couple, you know, superhero movies every year.
All adaptations.
They're all adaptations. So really, independent film is the one place where you can tell a 90-minute to 110-minute, you know, story in one sitting. And you know, and weirdly enough, you know, I had a filmmaker say to me recently, they just finished their film. They're like, oh, Dan, is it true? I keep hearing this is the worst time ever to be trying to sell an independent film or get it out there. And I was like, yes, but it's always the worst time ever to be doing that. And that's been true for 120 years. People have been making independent films since there were films. And I don't think that this is any worse than ever. I don't think it's any better than ever. You know, what's been great about 18½ is we're finding different ways to get the film out there. Like, we've made more money, and probably more people have seen the film on airplanes, you know, than any of my other films, for 100%. And that's because on an airplane, you can't commit to watching an 8-episode series of anything. No, you got 2 hours. Great. You're going to watch an actual movie, you know? And you know what? Those airplanes, they actually pay the filmmakers. Shocking, you know? It's the one place where the market sort of still works. And then, like, weirdly enough, this week, figuring out that, you know, public libraries in Kalamazoo actually will pay you for your DVD, and people are watching them. People are checking them out. So there are these weird markets and ways that people will engage with your film and watch your film in a way that even if you're making an episodic series for Netflix, there's no engagement with the audience. You know, what's great about films and film festivals, and Alan certainly knows this, is it's the last place where you can see a film with an audience. They're going to, if it's a comedy, they laugh. If it's a drama, they cry. It's a horror film, they shriek. If it's a bad comedy, they shriek. You know, and you can do Q&As and have that interaction with the audience in a way that is never going to happen either making episodics or in making TikToks, for that matter. You know?
Gotcha.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan. Go ahead.
I'm about an hour away or an hour and a half away from Kalamazoo. I love that.
Well, there you go. Go to their public library. They have our film.
Yeah, you could rent it there. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. You've been very generous with your time. And
thank you.
Plug away 18½ one more time.
There it is. 18½ available wherever fine DVDs are sold, rented, or checked out. You know,
and not only do you get the movie, but you get a fantastic documentary about film.
2 hour long. Thank you. A fantastic documentary. Is that the line that I can use?
That is. You can quote me on that. A fantastic documentary.
All right.
All right. Awesome, thanks a lot, Dan.
Great to see you again. Nice to meet you, Mike. Take care.
Nice to meet you too, man.